This news just came down a few minutes ago that Mohammed Badie, the supreme guide of the Muslim Brotherhood, has been ordered arrested along with several top aides. They're reportedly going to be charged with incitement to violence outside the Republican Guard headquarters. As you mentioned, more than 50 supporters of Mohamed Morsi, the ousted president, were killed in early Monday morning, mostly by live ammunition. And this was one of the bloodiest days since Mubarak's overthrow, if not the bloodiest incident of state violence. This is a very troubling trend of an increasing crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood. They're still the largest political group in Egypt. We've seen their members detained. Now their leaders, their figurehead, the supreme guide, is being ordered arrested. We've seen their media channels being shut down, and the state media and private media have completely adopted the military's line, repeated the military's claims that the military came under attack first by armed assailants, hardly shown any video or footage of the attack and of the many dozens dead or wounded, and have called the Muslim Brotherhood terrorists and so forth. And this has only increased the polarization and division in the country. And it'll be very difficult going forward when we have this kind of crackdown by the army and state security services, which have ridden this popular wave of anger against Mohamed Morsi for his many failures in his year of office, and looking to reassert themselves into the state and into positions of authority. It's going to be very difficult going forward to have the biggest political group in the country not taking part and feeling like it is being oppressed, as it has been for many decades under successive autocrats. And we'll have to see what happens in the coming days.
Sharif, what do you think accounts for the disproportionate crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood? What has been historically the relationship between the security forces and the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, as I mentioned, the Muslim Brotherhood has long suffered oppression under successive autocratic regimes in Egypt. It was Gamal Abdel Nasser in 1954, after he led a coup against the pro-British monarchy, who first clamped down on the Brotherhood and drove them underground, where they remained for very years. And many of their leaders have been jailed, many of them have been killed. But since the revolution, they, I think, sought to co-opt parts of the state after coming into power through the ballot box. And so they struck political pacts with the army, granting it everything it wanted in the constitution. Mohamed Morsi repeatedly thanked the police for their work, even despite mass police killings and torture. And instead of, I think, addressing grievances of people, he was seeking to co-opt these parts of the state, but ultimately failed. And once this popular mobilization got going, in large part because of the steadily declining economy, as well as political isolation and no real way for people to air their grievances, I think the army sought to step in, push the Brotherhood out, and reassert itself into the state.
Can you talk about the $8 billion promised by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, which to try to prevent the collapse of the Egyptian economy, but also seen as a counter to Qatar, which has been supporting the Muslim Brotherhood government, the vying between Arab rivals for Egypt?
Right. I mean, this is very significant. $8 billion coming at a time when the Egyptian economy is on the brink of collapse. This will certainly support the shaky military-led transition. And it comes in the wake, as you mentioned, of repeated cash injections from Qatar, which has supported the Brotherhood through this kind of aid, through gas deals, and helped prop up the Egyptian economy in sort of an artificial way when it was really collapsing from a lack of foreign reserves. So Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, which very much want to see a return of an army-led or a return of the former regime, which they very much backed, and were very much afraid of the Muslim Brotherhood and their claims to political Islam through the ballot box. I think they're very threatened by that and have historically been at odds in certain ways with Qatar over foreign policy, although Saudi Arabia and Qatar, of course, have the similar policies towards Syria. So, I mean, this is a significant cash injection. $8 billion almost matches the total that Qatar has given over many months. So it's a clear sign of support to this military coup and to the army-led transition.
Sharif, could you outline what some of the more controversial aspects of the constitutional declaration are and what the main opposition to the transition plan has been from all groups involved?
Right. So this constitutional declaration essentially now is the law of the land after the head of the armed forces abolished the 2012 constitution that was pushed through by the Muslim Brotherhood. And it basically sets forth a very speedy transition to a civilian government. It's about 33 articles, and it will essentially go in the order of amending the 2012 constitution within 4 months by a committee of legal scholars, followed by parliamentary elections and then presidential elections. Now, many critics say that this is repeating a lot of the same mistakes from the first army-led transition following Mubarak's ouster, that it was drawn up by an anonymous committee without any input from the main opposition groups that were calling for Morsi's ouster, including the National Salvation Front, including the youth-led group Tamarrud, who have voiced criticism for not being consulted in this process. It's a bare bones document that just outlines kind of the bare necessities, but given that, it makes very clear that it shields the military from civilian oversight. So that's a clear, it clearly prioritizes the military. And it promises inclusiveness, but gives no procedural guidelines for how to do that. And the timetable is very fast. So it's not it looks like it's repeating a lot of the same errors of the first transition, which led to this political crisis. And we've seen the National Salvation Front and Tamarrud come out and be quite critical, which is a step forward. At least they're voicing concerns that they're not being consulted. But we'll have to see going forward how much their voice carries weight with the military at this point. It's a very difficult time right now because I think the military is the most possibly destructive force to Egyptian politics. It is the most brutal force. It has the biggest economic interests to defend. And we're seeing them very successfully at the moment reassert themselves, use this wave of popular anger against Morsi to try and clamp down on any kind of dissent, and that is being targeted really at Islamist groups right now. And we're seeing the state media, the private media, really drumming, acting as a conveyor belt for the army's policies. And so it's a very difficult time right now in Egypt.